Everyone, welcome to the very insanely creative name Zev Reviews, where I review things. And as you can see in the title, I finally got the last one in the Lofree series, that is the Wizard. And yep, it is part of the Shadow series, so...
Shadow Wizard Buddy Gang, we love casting spells.
Yeah, sorry, had to do that. Anyway, this is the clicky variant on the Shadow series, so we're going to see how well that compares to the Lofree Ghost and the Lofree Phantom, the linear and tactile variants, and maybe let you know, is this worth a purchase? Is it worth the wait? Because I had to wait over a month for mine. And, you know, how you might want to strategize about how to use these switches. First thing I wanted to do was do an on-paper comparison. I haven't done that in the past, just so you can see the stats compared side by side. So as you can see, the Ghost compares pretty much to the V2 Red and the V1 Red, and yes, I know V1 has a ton of different options as far as actuation force or operating force. I'm just going to compare it to what it's supposed to be compared to on paper, just to keep it somewhat even. Anyway, you can see the operating force pretty similar. V2s are going to feel a little bit less resistant, so you just have a little bit less with 7 grams off there. Otherwise, they should compare pretty favorably against each other. Now, travel time is where we get a little bit of savings. So if you're really looking to shorten that throw, then yeah, the Lofrees are a tiny bit shorter. As you can see, 2.8 versus 3.2 or 3.0, which is pretty minuscule. If you take out, something in measure millimeters, it's really small. So how much a factor that is, I mean, the actuation travel is pretty negligible, really, especially the Lofree versus the V2s. It's almost pretty much the same. They're rated about the same amount of cycles, so 50 million times. If you wear that out, well, you've been playing a lot. Anyway, it's kind of funny how on the box they list 5,000 million cycles, which I think is definitely a misprint, but there's that. Next up, let's talk about your tactile options. So if we look, the Phantom compares to the brown, and then the V1 brown. Yeah, there is the burnt orange. It has 70 grams of force, but we're going to compare it again, kind of apples to apples. Now, in that group, they all have the same operating force on paper. Tactile force is when you can feel that bump. You get a little bit of increase on the V1, not too much. Again, the travel time, at least the total travel, you can see is shorter on the Lofree. However, the actuation travel is longer, so I'm not sure how that's actually working. Again, same amount of cycles, so there's that. Is that actuation travel going to make a huge difference with point something of a millimeter? Not especially. You can notice there's a tiny bit more variance in the V1 browns for what it's worth, but I don't think it makes too much of a difference. Finally, let's compare the clicky options, and I'm comparing the Wizards versus the V2 Blues and the V1 Whites. There are a number of options, again, for the V1. I'm just going to stick to the white because that's kind of the base model listed on the Kailh website. Once again, the V1 compares pretty directly to the Lofree option, which is interesting, with the V2 having a little bit less force to use. Tactile force, the Lofree fits right in the middle, a little bit just above the V2, so it's probably in practice not going to be noticeable, but unless you're super sensitive, which I'm not. Anyway, travel time, at least total travel, again, is shorter than the stock options, and it has shorter actuation travel as well. Again, 50 million cycles, that's kind of the standard here. It wouldn't surprise me if the Lofrees lasted longer just because of the palm construction. Finally, I want to bring the Lofrees together just to show you the differences between those. As you can see, the tactile has the actual initial least operating force, if that matters to you, though it does kick up to 55 when you engage the tactile bump. They all had the same amount of total travel. The Linear Ghost and the Clicky Wizard have the same amount of actuation travel. The Tactile has a tiny bit more. Again, in practice, I don't think most people are going to notice that. It's not going to be the game breaker for you. So I wouldn't stress about, oh no, I got the Tactiles. Am I going to lose every... No, probably not. Again, 50 million cycles lifetime, so there they are. Next test I want to run is just a sound profile of the raw switches, and I'm going to start with the linears, and this is a Kailh Speed Silver, just MX as comparison. Here's a Kailh V2 Red. And finally, here is the Lofree Ghost. Let's move on to tactiles. For tactiles, I'm going to lead off with the Kailh Speed Copper. And I only have in the low profile the Lofree Phantom, so let's just go with that. Let's move on to clickies. For clickies, I'm going to start with a Kailh Speed Gold. Next, I'm going to use a V1 Jade. And finally, let's finish it off with the Lofree Wizard. Again, this is just raw switch, no caps, just me holding my hand from the microphone about 6 inches away and clicking away with them. Time to move on to the actual controller testing, and I'm going to be testing on 3 different controllers as in my previous videos on the Shadow series. First, I'm going to be using the SGF Faust to test a 3D printed controller. Next, I'm going to test on a Haute42 T16, so acrylic. And then finally, I'm going to test on the Haute42 M16. Let me go over the methodology I'm going to use for testing, so you'll get a nice sound profile on each of these, as well as I'll give you some of my subjective thoughts, how I thought they feel. So anyway, these controllers are all loaded the same. On the directional movement buttons, these are loaded with the wizard switches. All of the top row, punch row, these are loaded with the ghost switches, the linears, and these on the bottom kick row, those are loaded with the phantom tactile switches. Let's start off with the sound test on our 3D printed controller. And again, these are all clicky, linear, tactile. We'll do single high taps, just kind of as loud as I can get it, then doubles, then kind of more realistic gameplay style. Let's do doubles. Now some sort of simulated gameplay. Sort of my immediate subjective thoughts on how these are performing. Well, I will say it, and I've sold a bunch of these and told everyone, I think you're going to like these a lot better than the stock V2s. And yeah, they all outperform that easily. They just feel so much better. Now, I will say these guys are probably the touch typiest out of it. If you like that, just, yeah. You don't get a lot of return energy. but it does have way more presence than the stock V2s, less wobble all around for any of these switches, and there's just more of a vibrant feeling. It just feels a lot better to play on. I just don't want to play on V2s anymore, just the stock ones. They just don't feel good. Anyhow, a lot of folks are out there. I know the Ghost are the most popular easily. They sold out pretty quickly when I listed some for sale. But don't sleep on any of the others. I feel like if you want that nice, subtle, tactile feedback, the Phantoms feel really good. And yeah, you can't go wrong with any of these switches, really. Unless you really just need a little bit more quiet, then yeah, you would stay away from the Wizards. However, if you really want that sound profile, that sound feedback, you like mashing and letting everybody know that you're mashing, then hey, go for it. They still feel really good. They do feel a little bit different than the tactiles. I kind of almost expected that the tactiles would be just a quieter version of the Wizard, but no, I don't think that's the case. These, for some reason, how I want to describe it as these have a little bit more front end feel. Like you get to the bump and it feels good, don't get me wrong. It's just a little bit sooner than you do on the Wizard for some reason. Like the Wizard click seems to happen in the back end. It's very hard to describe, but there we go. That's kind of my squishy feelings on them. Now have the T16 acrylic box, so let's see how this sounds. Again, high taps, doubles, and then simulated gameplay. Now doubles. And simulated gameplay. So does playing on acrylic change much? The sound profile, definitely. However, I think the feel, it actually brings out more of the clicky. Yeah, it just feels a little bit better here than on the 3D printed. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm just crazy, but this feels a bit more muted on the Phantoms, which isn't bad. It's just a little softer. I'm not sure why. Maybe it could be the keycap is influencing it somewhat. Again, these are my squishy feelings, so take them with a whole can of salt. These feel less touch typey in this, which is very interesting. In the 3D printed, they feel extremely touch typey. Just kind of that touch them and be done kind of feeling. I don't know how else to describe it. But I think these feel actually touch typey in this, if you kind of like that. It's a very subtle change, but it has some effects. Now, will this really affect your gameplay? Not especially. And again, you want to bring the noise, you get the clicky switches. If you just like down, up, you get linears. If you like that subtle feedback, you get the tactiles. Let's wrap up testing with the M16. Again, metal body, and I'm going to use the same methodology of single high taps, double taps, and then just some simulated gameplay. doubles. Let's do some simulated gameplay. So how do I feel about these three switches in the M16? Well, I've been struggling to describe it. It feels a lot more equalized across, all three in this, and I was wondering why. I went back, took the SGF here, and these feel like they require more pressure. And I was wondering if that might be because, these are smaller caps. They're about 20 millimeters versus, I think, 23, 24, 25 on here. So that might have something to do with it. And I think there are pads under here that soften things. So yeah, it just feels like there's less of a difference between the switches here in terms of feel versus using them with these smaller caps. It's kind of hard to pin down what exactly is causing that. But do they still feel great? Sure. Do they feel different? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get across. So on here, these feel, they just don't feel as touch typey. These feel somewhat more touch typey. Yeah, and these feel very touch typey. So there's that, just kind of that, front end response feel is what I mean. Again, very hard to describe. And it's kind of a sensation, once you feel it, you'll understand. And definitely, again, on the SGF, it's more pronounced, I think, and maybe on the T16 as well. So, anyhow, yeah, they still feel great, of course, but they do feel different, I'll say that. Let's wrap things up with some of my concluding thoughts. And if you've seen the last two reviews I've done on the Lofree switches, I like them a lot. I feel like they are a market upgrade over the stock V2s that come in a lot of these controllers. So yeah, if you can get yourself whichever switches you think are for you, I think you'll have a great time with them and just enjoy the game that much more. They just feel so much better than the V2s. They're smoother, they don't wobble. The linears just have that added bit of resistance that I feel just makes them better. It just feels like there's so much more presence even in the linears that the V2s, the stocks, just they don't have anything. Like I said in my last video, they kind of just show up to the job, do the bare minimum and go home. Well, these feel like they actually enjoy the job. So again, I know that's kind of squishy thinking, but there you go. Now, as far as which of these switches is for me, that's a separate question. Choosing the switch that's right for you without getting some and trying them out is kind of, well, you're taking a best guess. I can give you some guidelines, but ultimately your choice is up to you. If you enjoy sandwich switches, sandwich buttons, the OBSF, or other buttons that are just kind of, very light touch, then probably the Ghost is for you. You want something that just goes down, comes up, there you go. But if you like something noisier, then obviously you lean towards the Wizard. And if you like still getting that little bit of tactile feedback, it's not the most pronounced bump in the world, you go with the Phantoms. So those are my general guidelines, and again, these are all a straight upgrade over the Choc V2 stocks. But I found that I actually like a triple setup. So with the test setup, it seems to work for me. Is just keep these clicky, keep these linear, keep these on the tactile, and then I actually invert it for these two, and then I'm gonna put a clicky here, so that if I wander up here and I push down and I notice I'm getting a bump, oh yeah, I'm moving my fingers too far for some reason. Same difference here, because when I have these be opposites. It's a silly little thing, but it feels fun for me to play on, and since I have all the switches, I can do that. Obviously, for most of you, probably not going to go and buy every type of switch here. Most of you will probably select the Ghost and just not think about it, and that's fine. The Ghost is a very good switch. But don't sleep on the Phantoms and don't sleep on the Wizards. I would say the only problem with the Wizard is that there's only one place to get it right now, and you have to wait over a month for it, which kind of sucks. I know there are smaller sellers that might be dealing in it now, so that's good. It's something. Hopefully sometime we'll get sellers that will do custom quantities, so you can say, oh, I only want 8 Wizards, but I want 10 Phantoms, and I want 6 Ghosts for whatever reason. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully in the future we will be. Hey everyone, it is that time in the video. I've got a cat, and this is Sullivan. Say hi. He wants all your likes, your comments, and your subscriptions. You know the YouTube refrain. I'm not even going to go into it. I'm just going to say, if you don't do it, he's going to get you.